Hi guys, Buildzoid here, and today we're going to be taking a look at voltage control on the Aorus X470 Ultra Gaming motherboard. And this video is called voltage control because this doesn't have LLC, so that's that's gonna be fun. And it's a low end Gigabyte board, so the voltage control is in typical Gigabyte fashion freaking awful for really unintuitive. Once you get used to it, you can work with it, but honestly, for most people, really awful. What else is there? Right. Also, the Ultra Gaming is actually the exact same VRM as the Gaming 5. So everything that applies to this board right here in terms of the voltage controls also applies to the Gaming 5, because the Gaming 5 is literally like this thing with, I think, like they add a heat pipe to the heat sinks, and I think they add a bit more RGB and just very minor, additions to the motherboard in the way of bling. They don't actually majorly change how well it behaves in terms of overclocking, so you still get this VRM, you still get these heat sinks, they just get a heat pipe. So basically everything that I'm going to go through here today also applies to the Gaming 5. Also, I would like to thank alza.co.uk for providing the CPUs that I'm going to be using. So that's the 2400G and also the 2700X here. I have both of them on loan, so I do have to return them one day. But it is nice that I at least don't have to pay for my chips right now. And I am allowed to pretty much use them for whatever, so including liquid nitrogen. So huge thanks to them for providing the CPUs like this. And also, they're currently having a sale on LN2 pots from Kingpin Cooling. So if you'd like to check some of those out, I'm going to drop a link down in the comments below. And that's not going to be an affiliate link. That's just going to be a regular link. So yeah, if you want to check out those sales, because they do actually, right now, have a really good deal for the Kingpin F1 Dark LN2 pot. It's so good that I've been I'm tempted, except for the part where I blew all the budget on motherboards. So yeah, I can't go pick up an LN2 pot. So yeah, let's just get right into it. Of course, motherboard is thank you patrons, and the power supply here is also thank you patrons. So let's fire it up. And I'll switch it over to the BIOS. So right now it's on the 2400G, the 2700X will do second. And I cleared the BIOS, so it's going to take a little bit of time to sort of figure out what to do with the memory for the first time. So that's why the startup is taking a while. Okay, and as you can see, the BIOS has been cleared. So if we just go into the BIOS and we just compare what the BIOS reads versus what we can measure on the back of the socket. So I forgot to mention that the way this is wired up is that this multimeter, well, basically blue wire, SOC voltage, white wire, V-core, black wire, ground, they all go right behind the CPU socket. The reason why you do it this way is because the voltage right behind the CPU socket tends to only be about 20 millivolts lower than what you actually get at the CPU at very high current output. With a 2700X, the back of the socket is maybe 20-ish millivolts lower. For something like this, it's actually basically dead on, because the APU, being a quad core, really doesn't pull that much power. It's also, not on 12 nanometer. If I remember correctly, it's on 14 nanometer, and so for a given voltage, this thing pulls quite a bit less current. Now then, yeah, let's check those voltage measurements. And hopefully the multimeter decides to work first time. Okay, so as you can see, the BIOS is reading a tad high compared to the multimeter. But it's really not massively problematic. And if we measure the SOC, you can see that the BIOS is measuring more or less dead on. Well, yeah, I'll call that dead on because it keeps floating around, so it's kind of all over the place, and that's because of the power management doing its thing. So that's the SOC, that's the sort of BIOS readouts, and the board just consistently, especially for the V-core, it just reads high all the damn time. And I think that's because, for whatever reason, the motherboard sensor for vCore is not, like, for whatever reason, they're not using the feedback lines that are integrated into the CPU, which I don't know why they do that. But basically, they seem to be measuring, like, a bit, like, like I'd say it's like halfway in between the output of the VRM and the actual CPU socket, or it might even be right on the output of the VRM. I'm not entirely sure where the probe is. It's not like I've gone across the board looking for where the voltage matches what the software reads, but it doesn't look like the socket tends to, like, behind the socket I'm already measuring lower voltage than what the motherboard reports. Though the SVI2 sensors, which we'll get to once we're in Windows. So let's see how advanced our advanced voltage settings are. Whoa, that is extremely advanced, isn't it? Yes, typical Gigabyte. So you have dynamic vCore, dynamic SOC, CPU VDDP, which is dynamic as well, as in it's an offset voltage. You can't actually set that voltage, but chipset voltage you can set manual, like that's just a fixed voltage. DRAM voltage is fixed. DRAM termination is fixed. So that's all well and good down here. These are a bit fiddly because of being dynamic. So, and the next voltage setting is of course over here with GFX core voltage right there. So if we go and set that to 1.25, and then set the IGPU frequency to 1600, we're just going to start off with this to see how that behaves in terms of what you get in the operating system. So, and if you actually check the voltage right now on SOC, so right now we're at full IGPU voltage, and eventually it should go idle, he says, as it doesn't. Come on. Man, it would be really nice. Ah, there we go. See, now it's going idle properly. So now it's idling, right? And it idles properly at 1.02. And let's see what hardware info tells us the core voltage is at. You can see how the white, and it died. Yeah, so that's really fun, isn't it? It's unstable. Video TDR failure. Okay, so not enough IGPU voltage. Lovely. Absolutely lovely. It's funny, I swear I meant it. Well, I must have been using a lower frequency when I was pre-testing for this. Anyway, let's go to 1500 and hope that works. The other possible issue is that it doesn't like the voltage jumping up and down. Like, the VRM can't quite keep up. So yeah, now we're getting more like 1. Yeah. So even at idle, we're not going to get 1.25. And let's get through that. Let's get hardware info open. Run. And not sure. Right, I should probably zoom in on that. So mag. Nope. Nope. There. So, nope. Come down. SOC voltage right now. Yeah, okay, so that's reporting correctly right now. Yeah, so that's dead on. And vCore right now is, the auto ranging on this multimeter is just not keeping up. So the voltage readout for the software is correct right now. It's just the multimeter can't keep up with this. So let's close that and let's run Prime 95. So that'll give us some nice stable voltage. Bam. And vCore is now at, should have kept the magnifier open. This is so really, there. It's at 1.394. So we can clearly see that is reading wrong. Let's see what we get down here. That's reading correctly. So for whatever reason, this motherboard just completely bloody ignores the vid settings of the CPU, which is just great. That's lovely. That's exactly how that's supposed to work. So yeah, we're getting almost 1.5 volts. And keep in mind, I didn't touch the CPU core voltage. I literally just changed the IGPU voltage, but yeah. Gigabyte gonna Gigabyte. So that's lovely. We're just gonna stop that test. So basically, you can't just OC the iGPU on this motherboard and ignore the CPU, because if you try to do that, you're going to end up with a lot of extra V-core for no good reason. And let's just get 3D Mark up and running, and we'll take a look at how the voltage looks when you're actually running a 3D workload and not just, you know, trying to render the desktop. Because there's quite a difference in how much voltage you get, because obviously the load line slope is going to add some V-droop on that. So 3D Mark would kindly run. That'd be lovely. And as you can clearly see, our 1.25 volts has turned into 1.16. So yeah, you're looking at like, and the thing is, so the amount of V-droop you get is actually proportional to how much current the VRM has to push. So as you raise iGPU voltage, you're going to get more and more V-droop. So if at 1.25 volts, what we're seeing right now is like 90 millivolts. If you set like 1.3, you would probably see around 100 millivolts of droop instead of just 90. And then if you set like 1.35, you would see like 110 millivolts of droop. So you would need to set like a really, really high voltage to get the voltage that you actually want. So, yeah. And there's no LLC settings on this motherboard, so that's great, isn't it? So, yeah, 167 right now. Anyway, so that's what it looks like with the voltages when, you know, you just touch the iGPU. Now if we go and restart and start playing with those offsets, because we need to get some voltage control here. And we're basically going to try lock in the iGPU voltage to be static. Now the thing is, this motherboard actually overvolts depending on what memory frequency you're trying to run. So I'll just put the timing into manual, 36, and we're just going to crank it all the way up to, well, if we let's say we just start with 2400, and we're going to set 1.35, because that's good with these timings. That's good for up to 3200 megahertz, at least for demonstration purposes, not necessarily fully stable, but save configuration and exit. And we should be getting more SOC voltage now. So if we probe that, which, okay, that's just the iGPU being the iGPU. I want to, we'll go to Windows idle. And the capture card is being as cooperative as ever. And it's back to normal. So that's nice. Okay, get rid of the AMD error. And let's see, idle. Come on. Come down already. Yeah, so idle is a tad higher than it used to be. It's problem is I'm not actually that great at holding the probe in place, so there. So that's your idle voltage now. So you get like 1.1 as soon as you set the frequency above 2133. If we go into 3D Mark and actually run, you know, a bench run 3D Mark, then you'll actually see that the voltage shouldn't change, versus like our iGPU load voltage will actually stay the same. So, but it's really annoying in my opinion that the IGP, like the SoC basically overvolts itself for your core clock, and actually the CPU kind of does that as well. If you set the CPU frequency static, it'll kind of float the voltage as well. So there. And load voltage for the IGPU is still the same. So basically the only voltage that's gone up is the idle SoC voltage. And if we go restart, I'm starting to realize that I'll probably, screw it, we'll do the 2700X as well. You can watch this video at higher playback rates. Okay, so let's crank up that memory frequency without touching the SoC voltage and see what that gives us. So as usual, the boot up procedure is done at 1.2 volts. Then the IGPU initializes. Get our errors. Eventually it should drop to idle. Come on. There we go. So yeah, we still idle at 1.1 volts, which is just... so yeah, basically if you wanted to run the system completely static voltage, what you would do is, for like 3200 megahertz, is... Because if we go into 3D Mark, our load voltage is still going to be the same. So if you wanted to run static SoC voltage, what you would do after this is, well, you would set your IGPU voltage to 1.1 volts, and then you would set a very high offset voltage on top of that, which we will do just to demonstrate how that does work. Also, do note that the higher memory frequency means that the IGPU gets does more work, and that actually increases how much current it pulls when the IGPU speeds up. So yeah, now the IGPU is, you know, not completely memory, well, it's slightly less memory bottlenecked, and we're getting a bit more voltage droop because it's pulling more power, so it's drooping more voltage. So that's working as intended, as annoying as it is that your voltage just kind of comes down. But yeah, so load voltage for the IGPU is still the same thing. It's just coming down as we remove the IGPU bottleneck. Well, memory bottleneck. Not the IGPU itself is what's getting bottleneck. Now then, let's see if we can get this completely static, or at least as static as it can be with the complete lack of load line calibration. We're going to set that to 1.1, and we're going to want a constant, you know, we're going to want a constant voltage of around 1.2 volts, so we're going to set IGPU to 1.1, and we're going to set a 100 millivolt offset, and that should give us 1.2 volts all the time, everywhere. Well, at least until we hit 3D Mark, because it's going to droop like crazy, and we're probably going to end up around 1.12. Hopefully we don't crash. But yeah, now we're we're idling on one, well, there. I'm just going to give it some time. As you can see, the voltage just stays at 1.1, well, 1.19, because even at idle, your IGPU is pulling enough there. Now the IGPU stopped pulling current, and we're back up at 1.2. Well, little over 1.2. So yeah, now the droops come off. Let's get 3D Mark up and running, which will put some load on the IGPU, and we'll see the voltage fall all the way down to like 1.12 or 1.11. Because I'm expecting around 90, 80 millivolts of droop on this. So let's run that. So yeah, I mean, here's the thing. If you're like, you know, an extreme, like if you're me, this kind of voltage control scenario, not a huge issue. If you're the average user, this is absolutely infuriating because the motherboard, it just is so fiddly to set up for what you want. And yeah, oh man, I was dead on, 1.11. Yeah, so there's all your voltage just goes to hell. Lovely. So if you actually wanted to run like 1.2 for the, like, this is just kind of hard. Basically, I would run a, how would you run this? Oh, and the IGP, the capture card is being very cooperative again. Lovely, I love that. Well, okay. So I'm not gonna fix that. Just deal with it. Sorry, guys. Yeah. So if you wanted to, like, compensate for the droop on the IGPU, you would like set it to like 1.2 volts. And then it would technically, the problem is, when your IGPU is doing very light work, you would actually be getting like 1.3 volts. So, you know, like, honestly, I would probably, oops, I don't want to, no. Let's go back to 1500. Honestly, I would probably run something like 1.15 to like 1.2 volts IGPU, and then the massive SOC volt offset like that, plus 100. But yeah, this is just kind of fiddly. I've not really spent a lot of time like dialing it in for any specific overclock yet, but this is the kind of voltage control situation you have with this motherboard. Basically, your SOC voltage goes, like, as soon as you go past 2133, your SOC voltage is going to hit 1.1 volts, and then your IGPU voltage is your SOC voltage. It's just, basically, it stacks on, like, it just changes your, when the IGPU goes under load, it just changes, you go from your SOC voltage, from like 1.1 volts to whatever your IGPU voltage is set to, and then any of those voltages are then offset by the voltage offset. So if you have plus 100, it means that 1.1 volts plus 100 millivolts. If you have, if you have 2400 megahertz memory, and you have 1.2 volts on the IGPU voltage setting, and then you have plus 50 millivolts offset, that means you're going to be getting 1.15 volts idle, and you're going to be getting 1.25 volts light load on the GPU, and then when the GPU actually hits some workload, it's going to droop down below it's going to droop down. But it's going to be trying, like, it's going to be aiming at 1.25 volts. So that's kind of the voltage control situation for that, which is obviously obnoxious as hell. Now then, let's do some CPU overclocking. Now, if we just set the CPU to 39, and we're going to kill that, but we're not going to disable C states. And we're going to disable U. There. So now, let's see what core voltage we get. Yeah, and it just gives us like a ton of voltage because, I don't know, it's just like, that's the default programming on the CPU is just, 3.9 gigahertz? Burn myself, I will. It's not going to really burn itself, but, you know, it does throw a ton of voltage at the CPU. You just set 3.9 gigahertz. And as you can see, the voltage is actually still dropping for idle, right? Like, this is a common sort of misunderstanding with a lot of people. It's just like, oh, if you change if you don't use like P-state overclocking, your idle voltage, it's not going to go idle properly. Well, it's going idle. Like, that is going idle, because otherwise that voltage would be, like, the voltage would otherwise be rock steady. Instead, it's, like, dropping into the millivolts range. Yeah, it is. So, let me just start moving the mouse. There. And the CPU is, yeah. If we run Prime 95, we're probably going to see it drop quite a bit. Small FFTs. There. And, yeah, we get 1.392. And the software is reading out whoops. Mag. Go. Ta-da! And the software is reading out 1.394. So that's correct. That's all very well and good. Funnily, I wonder what the SoC voltage is at. Yeah, see? And this is why I don't like these motherboards. So the motherboard says the SoC voltage is at 1.1 volts. In reality, SoC voltage is at 1.2. For whatever reason, as soon as you start, like, messing with the core clock, like SOC voltage monitoring stops working, which is just bloody great. Yeah, now it's reading really, really high core voltage when core voltage is fluctuating too much for the stupid multimeter to pick up on it. I should have probably hooked up the oscilloscope for this part, but the problem is, with the oscilloscope and wires this long, it would just pick up a whole bunch of noise, and I don't really feel like having to, you know, figure out a way to deal with that. But basically, it's going idle properly. So, yeah, as long as you don't disable, and the multimeter decided to turn itself off. Okay, it's still reading more or less correct. But, yeah, so... Oh no, multimeter decided to go completely derp, I think. If the equipment didn't suck, that would be great, wouldn't it? Anyway, so basically, that voltage that we're getting right now is, well, let's, you know, just change the ratio again and see what we get. So the great part is that that's just on auto. If we set that to 0, then it's actually should stay the same, but we're going to just leave it on auto just to see what happens. I wonder if it'll give us some crazy amount of overvoltage. Because a lot of boards tend to do that. You start raising the CPU ratio and they just give you tons and tons of voltage for no good reason. So let's try 4 gigahertz, see what it does. Oh, and I'll also disable C-states to prove that the... voltage, no. Let's disable C-states so that the voltage stays locked in. Nope, not enable, disable, there. And now we should have constant 1.4 plus volts. Well, except for the droop. So... Oh no, it still keeps trying to go to idle or something. Or maybe I'm just like lifting off the probe. Yep, so now we're getting 1.44. So it hasn't given us anything stupid right now. That's nice. But as you can kind of see, the core voltage is now static, proper. And vid is broken, which is just... amazing, you know, that's exactly what we needed, and I really need more hands. There, so vid, completely bloody busted at this point, doesn't work at all. This is reading low, a little bit low, which is just, that's normal because there's going to be voltage drop across the CPU socket. This is reading high, that's the motherboard sensor, so that's just doing what it normally, well, okay, it's reading close enough. But... yeah, this is just awesome. And this, I do believe, is VDDR, which is fine. So, anyway, let's run small FFTs and see what happens. Yeah, and we just get the same amount of droop as before, so 1.39 volts. So honestly, if you had one of these 2400G APUs, you wouldn't have to do a damn thing on this motherboard to overclock it, because as soon as you set the CPU frequency, it basically gives you the maximum amount of voltage that I would recommend you ever try to run through one of these for this motherboard. Like, there's no sense trying to put any more offset on top of this because these voltages are already high. And if we look in the voltage readouts here, so the motherboard is reading high again. The SVI is reading exactly the same thing as on the back of the socket. So that's working great. Also, this current reading right here, completely bloody wrong. Like, I've seen this motherboard way over-report power consumption. So, yeah, it's just, this is incredibly unreliable and completely bloody useless, but that's fine. It's kind of normal. I just don't have the current monitoring stuff hooked up right now to the system to show you that that's completely wrong, but it tends to be completely bloody wrong. So, it's kind of the core voltage situation right there. for the 2400G. So that's lovely. So yeah, Gigabyte motherboards. So basically, the SVI voltage works. The SVI2 voltage for this board. The on-motherboard voltage sensors don't. There's no LLC to speak of, and the IGPU voltage and the SOC voltage are kind of a bit of a mess in terms of how they work together. I just need to swap out the CPU now, so we're just going to do that. Power supply. And we're going to check how this deals with the 2700X. And I'm expecting it to just droop a ton, because it was, with the 2400G, we were losing what? We were going from like 1.44 idle to like nothing full load. Well, 1.44 idle to, and that radiator doesn't have enough space to be in, so that's great. To 1.39, so that was like 50 millivolts. Unless the 2700X because the thing is, the CPU actually sets the load line. So unless the 2700X has a lot more aggressive load line settings, this thing should be dropping like 100 plus millivolts or something once we put the 2700X in there. So that's going to be just perfect. Wipe the thermal paste off so I'll get all. Oh. 2400G comes out. 2700X goes in. And where did I put the thermal paste? Oh, there it is. It's gonna throw an X on there. There we go. That's our thermal paste application. That works fine. That's the CPU swapped out. Now let's get the GPU in. I'm actually not sure that I've run this GPU in here, so Windows might have a bit of a fit with the drivers, but whatever. There. Wipe the BIOS. I'm just gonna press that. Stick that on the card. And we're good to go, I think. Yes, we are. Oh. Come on, boot up already. There we go. Finally got it. And we're going into Windows. Lovely! Okay, well, that's not what I needed. Now we have a resolution you guys can actually see, so that's great. There we go, BIOS has been reset. Let's check our voltage readings. Okay, so apparently we're at 1.38 volts for the... Okay, that's more or less Okay, so that's great. So now the motherboard is reading lower than the multimeter. So now it seems to be working correctly, and yeah, SoC voltage is way down there, which is normal. So let's see, let's go through the different memory settings and see how much it changes our voltage, because that's just a thing Gigabyte motherboards do, and you need to keep track of that, because your SoC voltage just comes up and down with your memory multiplier. So we're just going to set 1.35 again, save configuration and reset. Let's see what SoC voltage we get now. And we don't need to go all the way into Windows, because this being a CPU doesn't have the whole IGPU voltage thing going on. Okay, so 2400 megahertz looks like we're getting the same core voltage as before, well, SoC voltage as before. Let's go up a notch. Okay, so now it's bumping up the SoC voltage a bit, I think. We'll see once we hit BIOS. Yeah, okay, it's definitely starting to bump it up a bit. Before we were getting like 0.84, now we're getting 0.875. If we check the PC health status, yeah, it's reflecting that, so it's definitely bumping up the voltage a bit. We go to 2933, should bump it up again. Now we're getting over 0.9 volts, so yeah, and basically this is, you need to keep track of this, because as you're overclocking your CPU, well, as you're overclocking your memory, how much offset voltage you need to get a certain amount of SoC voltage will change, because the motherboard changes how much voltage you get. Let's go to 3200. Now we're getting 1.1 volts. Lovely. So at this point, you would only need an offset of like 50 millivolts to get, you know, 1.15 volts. And if we go up some more, I don't think it should raise the voltage any higher. We shall see. Okay, yeah, so it tops out at 1.1. So basically, if you want to go past 1.1 volts, well, more like the maximum voltage it'll apply is 1.1 volts on its own, and then past that it'll just be normal. Well, past that it won't go any higher. So that's how that works. And then your offset applies obviously on top of whatever voltage you just measured. So if we wanted to set 1.2 volts, let's say, right, we just do that. And now we're going to get 1.2 volts. And if I wanted to get 1.2 volts at a lower memory, like lower frequency, let's say you have, you know, 4 sticks of memory, like, I don't know, 64 gigs of RAM. Can you actually have 60? Yeah, you can have 64 gigs of RAM on this. This is a 4-DIMM motherboard. So if you were running like 64 gigs of RAM, the memory controller would be under an incredible amount of load, so you wouldn't really be able to run it at a very, very high frequency, even with a ton of extra voltage necessarily. So you would end up in a situation where you're at like 2933, which if we remember was like a little over 0.9 volts. So you would need something like, let's see what that gives us. Yeah, so that doesn't even give us 1.15, and really around 1.15 is what you need to max out the memory controller on most of the Ryzen 2700Xs. Actually, most Ryzen CPUs in general, you need around 1.15. Some will benefit from a bit more. Most don't benefit from as much as 1.2. Like 1.2 tends to be a bit much. Okay, so now we're getting, yeah, so we're going to need a bit more offset because it is really not giving us that much voltage. Now, a potential issue with this voltage control scheme that Gigabyte has is that your core voltage setting is obviously tied to the vid table of your CPU, kind of. So basically, if we check the core voltage, right now we're getting 1.38. If we go to advanced frequency settings and we just punch in 40, right, and then we reset. Okay, well that's pretty dumb. We get 1.2-ish volts. Yeah. Okay, so that's working. So, and actually, I'm just going to disable all the power saving stuff just to get this to be less fiddly. There. Let's see if it boosts the voltage any higher. So potentially what you might run into is like if you have a CPU like a 2700, which has a really low stock all-core boost voltage. Yeah, okay, so it just sticks to 1.2. Yeah, so basically what you're going to run into is if you have like a 2700, your all-core boost voltage is going to be like, I don't know, 1 volt or something? I'm not entirely sure. But for this CPU, all-core boost voltage is around 1.2, right? Like, this is the voltage the motherboard will start with. And the problem is, this offset right here only goes up to plus 300. So if you have a 2700 on this motherboard, you might actually run out of voltage range. But I don't have a 2700, so I can't actually test that. But I have heard from people that that's actually a bit of a problem. And yeah, it is a problem. The board literally doesn't, because it just offsets off of whatever the CPU defaults to. So if your CPU defaults to 1 volt, well, your maximum voltage is 1.3. And that's before you take into account all of the V-droop. So yeah, this is not ideal, to say the least, especially for the 8-core, because as you pull a ton of current, it's just going to droop like crazy. So we're going to see if we can get around, set that, and just go into Windows and run some Prime 95 and check out how much droop we get. I'm expecting terrible things. Yeah, even the Windows boot process is so intense. Let's just let it idle. Okay, wait. I'm just gonna crank up the resolution. Go. Now let's open up hardware info. Okay, so idle voltage is around 1.48. 1.43. So yeah, vid is just broken again. Let's get the magnifier up again. Mag. There we go. So, vid voltage, completely bloody broken, as expected. So, no surprises there, but this is the voltage you're offsetting off of, obviously. So, if we scroll down, core voltage, completely freaking broken. And mind you, that is the SVI sensor. Like, that's not, like, see? Broken. Completely freaking broken. Like, Gigabyte, what the hell is this? Oh, and you can't see. Damn it. There. Broken. Completely broken. Like, it's not even close to the voltage we're getting. Lovely. Awesome. Incredible. Great. Great motherboard design right there. This is a little bit less useless because it's reading high, but at least it's reading something that's kind of in the range of what we're looking for. This is similar to that in terms of accuracy, so this is a tad more reliable, but not great. Yeah, not great. Well, what did you expect? Okay, so let's see what happens when we run Prime 95. Now, I expect the CPU to actually drop the vid voltage when we do that. That's a lot of threads. So, yeah, our vid is now 1.1. Yeah, so it's not just V-droop that's a problem. Your vid actually drops as well. Actually, it's mostly just the vid dropping. Right? Because if you do 1.13, what, 1.14 plus 250. Oh, so there's not actually that much load line. It's just the vid being, you know, dynamic is lowering your core voltage. So yeah, if you have a 2700 and your idle voltage, when you lock the, when you change the CPU ratio, whatever voltage you get in the BIOS idle, that's going to drop lower when you go under load. So that's great. But let's see if we have a single voltage sensor on here that's actually even remotely close to what we're actually getting. This, wrong, completely useless. This, just as wrong, completely useless. Is anything in here even close to the voltage we're actually at? I mean, technically speaking, you know, if you're desperate, what you can do is you can just look at this voltage readout right here and add the offset voltage to it. Right? Just do that and you'll be good. And I do realize that the CPU is getting really, really hot. It's really, really hot in this room. I'm sunset side, so I'm cooking right now. It's like probably well over 28 degrees ambient in here. So yeah, and Prime 95, that's with AVX, so that's just hammering the system. But basically, because of how this works, you just get completely crap numbers. This is all wrong as well, because it's working with that voltage value instead of the actual voltage value. So all of these power calculations are wrong. I think they're probably just too low, and if you compensated for the voltage difference, they'd be accurate, but yeah, that's just perfect, isn't it? Lovely. So yeah, that's kind of the traps of Gigabyte motherboards. The Ultra Gaming and the Gaming 5, they'll both do this, exactly this, where basically you're offsetting from the vid goes down as you apply load to the CPU, and your offset stacks on top of that. So yeah, that's kind of obnoxious, but it is what it is. So if you buy one of these motherboards, just be prepared to deal with this. And also, yeah, that's just the level of voltage control Gigabyte has. I have no idea why they can't just, implement a actual, like, static voltage setting. It shouldn't really be that hard, but yeah, this is what you get. So that's what you're stuck with. But definitely don't, like, the motherboard voltage sensors, just ignore those. If you're using this motherboard with a 2700X or probably a 2700 or any other of the AMD CPUs, you should just take the SVI voltage and add the offset to that, and that'll get you pretty close to what your actual voltage really is, which is, it's less than ideal, but that's why some motherboards cost way, way, way more than this one. Also, just Gigabyte needs to get over themselves and do this properly, because I've seen cheap boards do this better than this one. Yeah, that's just standard Gigabyte BIOS right here. What else is there to say? So, yeah, hopefully, if you have the Gaming 5 or the Ultra Gaming, this covers all of your issues with voltage control, because that's just how Gigabyte decided that they're going to implement voltage control, and they did this on X370, and I thought it wasn't that great, and they're doing it again on X470, and I still think it isn't that great. But you could live with this, I think, but there's motherboards at around this price point which do this, do the voltage control thing much, much better. So I don't see a good reason why you would this. The one positive that I can say about this motherboard is this has a clock gen, so this can do BCLK overclocking. The only issue is just, do you really want to trade convenient, usable, intuitive voltage controls for BCLK, when the only real use for BCLK is to dial in memory settings and that kind of, it's really just sort of, it's like for dialing in your little 1-2% overclocks for benchmarking useful. For your everyday, usage, 1 or 2%, you're not even going to notice that, and you definitely will notice just how awkward it is to work with the voltage controls on this thing. So yeah, I'd say there's boards that just do everything. The core features of a motherboard, I feel, are much better implemented on some other motherboards at the similar price point. So yeah, praise be to Gigabyte for doing great voltage control right there. Because yeah, they've done it again. I think on a 6-core it wouldn't be too bad, but yeah, it's not ideal. It's definitely not ideal, but we'll see. I don't know. Maybe I'll find something I still like about this board, but right now it's just as far as the voltage control is concerned, at the very least it's unintuitive. At the very worst, it's just it's obnoxious. Though it is workable. Like, it is workable, but yeah. So that's it for the video. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, suggestions, or questions. Did I mention questions twice? I think I did. But anyway, you can just leave a comment down in the comment section below. If you, one last thank you to Alza for both of the CPUs that I just used here. If you'd like to check out the set, like if you'd like to pick up an LN2 pot, they do have a sale on them right now. So I'm gonna leave a link to that. And if you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon, a PayPal, and t-shirts. You can find a link to all of that down in the description below. And yeah, thank you to the patrons for funding the purchase of this motherboard and the power supply used for this video. Also, I'm probably going to be buying a new multimeter soon because this thing is just absolute garbage. Well, it's not like, it's just unreliable as hell. Like, sometimes getting it to work, not fun. Like, turning it on and off again until it starts reading properly, really not fun. Anyway, that's it for the video. It's 50 minutes long. Good job, me. And goodbye. So, yeah. See ya.